Welcome to the Media Leader Podcast. I'm Jack Benjamin. If you were to ask any media owner what aspects of their business are driving growth, I'd bet nearly all would say it's their digital assets. This is as true of TV. ITV just announced it saw a 10% growth in digital revenues compared to flat overall revenue growth, as it is in publishing, as seen in the latest consumer ABC figures, as it is in out-of-home, as it is in, of course, social media and search. So it was little surprise that, according to the IAB UK's latest digital ad spend report, in 2025, the UK's digital ad market grew 10% to £40.5 billion. It's a staggering number, especially when you consider that AA Work estimated the total UK ad market reached £46.9 billion last year. Elizabeth Lane is the head of Insight at IAB UK. I wanted to sit down with her to unpack the growth being reported by digital media owners, how social media is still growing ad spend at a remarkable pace despite vocal backlash by some industry leaders, and why video is driving significant growth across channels. This is our conversation. I hope you enjoy. Elizabeth Lane, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you co-authored the latest IAB UK digital ad spend study conducted in partnership with the consultancy Oliver Wyman. I'm curious, before we really dive into any of the details, how would you summarize the top lines? What are the key takeaways?
Thank you. So yeah, the top line number for ad spend is always a really big one. We're measuring digital advertising in the UK. It's been growing for a number of years. And this year is no different. So in 2025, digital ad revenue reached £40 billion, which is a new record, a big chunky number. And we're always really pleased to be able to announce it. But it's quite a big number, sometimes too big to comprehend, really. I mean, even when you ask your favorite Gen AI tool to translate it into something meaningful, the suggestions you get are things like it being enough to fill 16,000 Olympic swimming pools and, pretty intangible stuff. So actually, in terms of top lines and what sticks out, the thing that leaves an impression with me is not the number itself, but the fact that it represents 10% growth compared to 2024, which I think is impressive for two reasons. We had a pretty rocky year within the ad industry itself, and you might have expected that to have affected confidence in spending. But then secondly, also the UK economy grew really slowly. We saw 1.4% growth in GDP in comparison, so a 10% growth is really, really impressive, and I think shows that our industry is incredibly resilient and perhaps is getting more confident with uncertainty being a bit more of the norm.
Certainly, I imagine a figure that will be brought up by the likes of the Ad Association and any kinds of lobbying that they might be doing in terms of government support or anything like that, and sort of that it is a growing part of the UK economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, advertising normally does surpass GDP in terms of growth, but given the year that we had, particularly things like the late autumn budget coming in and possibly budgets being held back, the fact that we had double-digit growth again, shows a really strong and resilient industry. Yeah.
Growing digital ad spend probably won't be a surprise to many of the listeners on the show. I mean, for years now, digital, be it search, social, the digital arms of more traditional media channels like out of home, it's been driving the lion's share of growth for a lot of these businesses. But I was still struck by the scale of continued growth within some of the channels and formats. In particular, ad spend on social media growing 21% year on year to 11.5 billion. That's pretty staggering to me. Especially given that it's sort of occurred amid a context in which a lot of industry voices that have been on this podcast, like Peter Field or mental health advocates as well, like a Simon Kilby, they've argued that brands are probably spending too much on social, and yet the number keeps growing at a 20% clip. What do you think is behind that?
Yeah, you're right. So yes, it double the growth rate of the overall digital ad market at 21%, quite a sizable jump. I mean, I think there's it points to maybe two or three distinct factors here. Firstly, the social story is tightly interwoven into a video story, so I'm sure we'll come on to talk about that. But social spend is more video based now. And when we see social video itself, that grew even faster than the 21% of social overall. So video is one of the biggest winners in digital, and I think that is driving a lot of the social gains as well. But secondly, I think social continues to be a channel that advertisers see as being able to do many things, so brand building and driving purchases at the same time. And in other research we've done at the IAB, social is perceived as one of those channels that can hit all of those outcomes. But I think lastly, and I think we often forget, especially when we're talking about revenue numbers, we forget that it's actually at the end of this, there are real people, you and I, seeing these ads. It's partly because this is where we as consumers are spending our time. I mean, it's linked to that video theme. We're spending more and more of our time on social. Almost all age brackets have somehow found even more time in our days to scroll through our social media feeds. But I don't think it's just that either. I think we're choosing to diversify our social media choices. I mean, I only have to sort of think about how quickly Reddit has risen over the last 2 years to show that we're actually choosing more social media platforms than ever before. So I think that's part of the reason too.
Are certain platforms, I mean, you mentioned Reddit, they've reported very strong growth figures year on year globally. Are you seeing that across the UK market specifically? Are there certain platforms essentially that are sticking out a little bit more than others at the moment?
I think all the social media platforms are doing very well. I mean, we have to look at audience data. I can't talk about specific figures for revenue, but look at consumer trends. If you look at how many people and how much time people are spending on sites like Reddit, you can see that it has had a meteoric rise over the last 2 years in the UK.
From a methodological standpoint, I'm just curious. I mean, social media companies and other tech companies more generally are generally pretty coy about reporting their advertising revenue figures. I mean, many publicly don't report how much ad revenue they made in the UK. Sometimes some of them might break it out by region, but generally it's a global figure that they report publicly. So I'm just curious, actually, how are you estimating these figures?
Yeah, so it was a good question. So the methodology we use to calculate digital ad spend has 3 different approaches to it. So the first and the best source are these direct submissions. So lots of companies in digital advertising, whether it's media owners or intermediaries, will send us their figures for the last year. So they'll send us their advertising revenue figures in digital for 2025 and broken down as far as they can into different channels, different devices, etc. So that's the best source that we get, and we get a lot of that. The second, as you mentioned, not every company either has data broken out by the UK or doesn't submit to Adspend. So the second way we do that is that we model the data. And that can either be through company reports, it could be through company's house data, it could be that a company may have submitted to Adspend previously, and we can use that data to model for 2025 as well. So we model the rest of the market. But the third thing that we do is that we have an advisory board at the IAB, so made up mostly of agencies, but also some analysis companies who take us through and help us with our modelling. So we get that sort of verification that way too. So that's how we come up with our ad spend figure. It's those 3 different approaches.
For the companies that do send directly figures to you, is that audited by any? I mean, not to accuse anyone of anything, but when you see massive figures like this, you would want to make sure, wow, okay, they're not necessarily fluffing themselves up.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we don't have the capacity to audit every single submission we get, but we certainly have sort of, flags. If somebody suddenly sent us a figure that was a huge increase on what they sent us the previous year, for example, it would get flagged up and we would double check that. So yeah, we do as many verifications as we are able to do.
Gotcha. Okay. So you mentioned video. And video did stand out to me as well. I mean, investment in video grew 20% year on year to 9.3 billion. That's video, not just inclusive of social media, but it does account for, I think, 59% now of total social media investment and 23% of total digital ad spend. So talk to me a little bit about what's driving that phenomenon. Is it commercially led? Is it sort of these media owners saying we can make a lot more money this way by pivoting to video again? Or is it actually consumers are really demanding a lot of this type of content and we're meeting them where they are?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a mixture of all those 3 things that you mentioned there. It's not a sudden popularity. I mean, I actually feel like a bit like a stuck record. I think I've done this ad spend report for 5 years now, and I think I've said video's been a driver every single time. But yeah, this year we've seen it rise even more. I mean, I think partly it's linked to the social picture that we've already been talking about. But I think there are also 2 other trends that are sort of happening simultaneously. One is the migration of budgets from linear to digital. We've been hearing a lot about that over the last few years. We've been hearing recently about how that's been consolidating more rapidly over the last year, and also sort of aligned to migration of budgets different type of migration is the fact that media owners, think news brands, audio content providers, are now diversifying into their video offerings now too. But I think the second big trend we're seeing is just in terms of the sophistication of the streaming and the VOD offer now in what we at the IAB we call a TV plus area of video. In terms of programmatic or collaborations with DSPs, in terms of there being more international players in the UK market now, and even we did some qualitative interviews for our Adspend report this year. We even heard a lot about how connected TV players are now creating their own self-serve platforms for small businesses, for example. So they're sort of unlocking new areas of revenue too. So I think it's a mix of money moving in from other parts of the market, also video being able to unlock new streams of income, and then linked very much to what we were talking about in social as well, that we as consumers are spending a lot more time watching video in different environments.
From a social media perspective, it strikes me that, and this question comes up a bit just in sort of conversation, is social media even social anymore? I think has been kind of an open question for the past couple of years. And when I see that so much of their ad revenue is actually being derived from video, should we be thinking about these platforms really as pure entertainment platforms, or is there still actually even a social element to them? I don't know what you make of that.
Well, I mean, you quoted the figures yourself earlier. Yeah, I mean, more social ad spend is video based, but it's not, the vast majority yet. We're still seeing a good chunk of it, over 40%, is still non-video. So actually, yes, it is an entertainment destination, but it's not all video based. So we do still need to have that distinction, I think. So social display as well is still playing a big part in how social is performing so well overall in the ad market.
You mentioned some of the big TV players moving more into streaming. This has been a years-long process, and ITV actually just hours before we had this conversation released their own earnings, and you could really see that digital is sort of driving most of the revenue growth, and that linear TV ad revenues are sort of weighing on growth. How do you expect that going forward, I guess? I would imagine the digital revenues continue growing. Is there a certain point at which, especially among broadcasters with a little bit more of traditional businesses, that there's a flip and that the growth among digital revenues can really start to outpace declines maybe to linear businesses?
I mean, certainly the analysis we've done, the forecasts we've done over the next few years suggest that the digital video is still going to continue growing. It doesn't seem like it's going to slow down. We asked we did a survey of people across the digital ad industry and asked who they thought the biggest winners and losers were going to be of the next 12 months, and video came out top in terms of where most gains in spend would be seen in 2026. So I think it's fair to say that we expect video to be one of the key drivers, if not the biggest driver, of digital ad growth over the next couple of years. Whether we get to that tipping point with more traditional forms of advertising, it's hard to say. It feels like there can't be an infinite growth of advertising entirely. So we think that there will be more movements towards digital. But yeah, I think we'll have to sort of see how this year and the next year pans out in terms of how those shifts continue to go, to see what happens really to linear budgets overall.
I wanted to highlight a couple other channels that I thought posted some interesting growth figures. Search grew 6% year on year to 17.9 billion. Is that's still a plurality of digital ad spend? Is that correct? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think search is one of the ones that everyone has been particularly interested in this year, because I think we hear a lot in the terms of the consumer story about how search is being one of the most disrupted platforms. But actually, in terms of ad spend, yes, I mean, 6% isn't the double-digit growth we saw overall, but it's still growth. We're not really starting to see ad spend being eroded yet in the same way that we're seeing consumer habits change. It's still a very safe pair of hands, and still as well the biggest share of digital ad spend, like 44% of all ad spend is search. So I think it's still proving its ability in terms of ROI to advertisers. I think I'd place a bet on the fact that search is going to carry on being that sort of quiet giant in digital advertising for quite a few years to come.
What would account for? I mean, the bigger you are, the harder it is to keep growing at such double-digit rates. But I'm curious, 6% versus 20% in social media. what accounts for that? Because there's been a lot, as you mentioned, that has changed in the search market over the past year. And now we're starting to see sort of new entrants with AI search. What Google wants to do with monetizing that, I think, still remains to be seen. Certainly, ChatGPT is now starting to test ads. And I wouldn't be surprised if more AI companies start doing that as well. So is it hedging at all, or is maybe investment that otherwise in years past may have gone to search, maybe going into other channels?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a very interesting question. We're not yet starting to see signs or hearing a lot about the fact that budgets are being moved out of search into other areas. I think a lot of it is budgets moving from linear into digital, but also unlocking new areas. I mean, one of the areas that we haven't talked about yet, but is one of, alongside video, has been one of the big growth areas, has been retail media. Which had a great year. It's one of the big growth areas, and we've seen those UK retailers really ramping up their capabilities. It's new business though. It's not eating into other areas really. It's that enviable data that they have, the scale quality of it, being able to target really effectively, and they're unlocking new streams of revenue that didn't exist before. So I think the growth in some areas we might start to see affect search, but certainly not yet. And actually, in most areas, it's coming from either other areas of linear budgets or unlocking completely new streams of revenue.
Just to put a figure on it, retail media ad spend grew 18% to £3.8 billion. And so you're suggesting that advertisers are actually maybe growing their overall ad budget in order to invest in retail media, as opposed to necessarily pulling from somewhere else and reapportioning it into retail media?
Yeah, well, I think it's a bit of both. So we have there've been some research that's been done at IAB Europe asking where agencies are seeing retail budgets come from, and it was a mixture of new budget emerging, and then it coming from other traditional forms of traditional media advertising. So I think it's a little bit of both. But yeah, I definitely think that it's not all being taken from other parts of the market.
And who are the big winners here? Is it Amazon that's really dominant? How's Tesco doing? How's Sainsbury's? How are all these businesses sort of competing in this space? Because I think when a lot of people hear retail media, their first thought is to go and think of the giants, right? And that includes as well the Chinese giants.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you definitely hit on something that we need to keep in mind over the next few years. It's all of the above. So yes, Amazon have obviously been in this game the longest, but the big UK groceries are competing in that space too. And you only really have to walk around a big supermarket today to see how they've really upped their game in terms of their in-store capabilities. There's lots of partnerships emerging as well. I think that's the other big trend we've seen in digital advertising over the last year is collaboration within your peer group, but also across peer groups. So within retail media, I'm thinking the fact that there are more brands are talking about matching retail media with traditional media, TV companies, for example. So I think that's another area where retail media is really ramping up its capabilities. But yeah, to your point, we are also starting to see, definitely in terms of consumer behavior, that we're spending more time on Temu, on Shein, also secondhand stores as well. So think Vinted has seen a huge rise over the last few years in terms of consumer time and reach on this app. So I think the competitive set for retail media is only going to diversify over the next few years.
I imagine that creates some interesting opportunities, right? If in advertisers, not to say that you shouldn't spend necessarily on an Amazon, but if there's a smaller version, maybe you can get a little bit higher share of voice with a smaller competitor, let's say.
Yeah, and more niche audiences as well. I think, right. Certainly something like Vinted would be, tapping into different audiences, I think, yeah.
In terms of other channels, both digital out-of-home and gaming saw a similar 11% growth to £1.1 billion, £1.3 billion, respectively. That's solid double-digit growth, but of course, those figures are on the lower end compared to some of these other verticals. And I'm curious how you view both digital out-of-home and also gaming, which in some ways they're completely different, but also a lot of the in-game advertising, at least, is often compared to digital billboards, just in a virtual space. I'm not sure if in-game advertising is leading growth versus just general advertising around, say, mobile games. So I'm kind of curious how you view these verticals.
Yeah, so yeah, and I was to say also, we always like to talk about the areas that might not be delivering the biggest ad spend, but are having really good years as well. So yeah, digital out of home, matching the overall market growth. I mean, I think that was actually one that we were slightly surprised about because we'd expected a much faster growth last year due to its exemption from the less healthy food ban. So 11% was really good, but we're hoping to see it grow even further. It's still expected, I think, to outpace traditional out-of-home marketing, particularly because it's increasing its programmatic capabilities. So we're still hoping to see that digital out-of-home will start to grow even further in the market in years to come. And then gaming, yeah, I mean, I always want to shout out about gaming because it still feels like it's quite a nascent part of the market and not central to those average brand plans when actually audiences are there and they're dedicating core parts of their day to it. And yeah, the comparisons between digital out of home and gaming in terms of their attention capabilities, definitely they sort of sit in a similar space there. I mean, we often say that ad spend lags behind consumer behavior by a couple of years or so. I mean, in gaming, I feel like it's more behind than that. I think it matched the overall market last year, still a good growth rate, but I think advertisers still feel that tension between the gaming's potential for high attention consumers, but also ads that might get in the way too much. And I think the challenge there is how to de-risk gaming in the advertiser's mind because it is such a high potential there, I think, for advertising spend.
Yeah, calling gaming nascent still is I mean, it's just funny to me because I feel like I've been having the same conversation around gaming for the entire time that I've been here at the Media Leader. And
Yeah.
You mentioned sort of the tension with consumers probably not loving advertising encroaching upon their games. And I imagine a lot of publishers probably would feel a little uneasy about that as well. What comes up with members or when you talk to agencies or advertisers, I would think that a lack of measurement standard would be a significant player in that. In terms of de-risking, to me, a lot of it, the conversation I hear comes down to measurement.
Yeah, I mean, measurement more generally is one of the big challenges that we hear about across the digital advertising industry as a whole. So it's not specific to gaming. Yeah, of course, there are some areas where measurement seems like it might be a bit more difficult. Gaming might be one of them, but actually, I think when it comes to gaming, I think what's holding it back, it's partly measured, but I think it is that sort of tension of how gaming ads might get in the way of the experience that audiences are experiencing at the time, and many gamers might react negatively to that. I think another thing that we haven't really touched upon, but I think came up when we were asking industry experts about gaming and people in advertising who work within gaming, is that there is also a concern that regulation might create risks, and I think particularly gaming is feeling that. So there's concern about tightening rules from UK and Europe on data use, and player safety, I think, is one of those areas as well. So yeah, regulation, I think, is one of those other things that is making gaming a bit more risky in the mind of some advertisers.
Regulation's a really interesting issue within the gaming space. There's been a lot of concern around loot boxes as sort of gambling on certain platforms. Also, Roblox has sort of come under quite a bit of scrutiny potentially with regard to just player safety. Any game that attracts a lot of younger people, especially, and of course, advertisers probably have to feel very careful given regulations around targeting kids. I have to imagine that's part of the calculation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was exactly the feedback we were getting when we were doing this research. But yeah, I mean, I still think it's an untapped opportunity in gaming. It's still not considered a must-have line on many media plans today, and there is a very keen audience spending a lot of time there, and I think there is more potential than is possibly being optimized at the moment.
So you mentioned that as part of the report, you also surveyed IAB members. You did some qualitative research. 48% of the IAB members you surveyed said they believe AI will be the defining force in digital advertising over the next decade. How do you expect AI to change digital planning strategies?
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest disruptor we've ever seen, isn't it? There's no beating about the fish there. How it's going to affect spend habits is actually quite hard to say right now. We're not really seeing that much of a change yet in the figures that's obviously due to AI. I mentioned the fact that ad spend tends to lag behind consumer behavior. So it might be that we're sort of in that calm before the storm, possibly. I mean, one thing is for definite, this time next year, we're going to be seeing some ad spend coming through from generative AI. I can't promise we'll have cracked how to measure it, but it will be in there somewhere. But yes, in the interviews we did with industry experts, they're saying that they're reshaping their planning models in other ways through AI. So it could be making that planning process more efficient, or things like simplifying creative, particularly in areas such as audio, sort of unlocking simple creative to attract new brands to that space. I mentioned already as well, self-serve platforms for small businesses are opening up across different channels through AI as well. So I think there's some quiet optimism at the moment in many areas that AI is actually going to help unlock spend. Of course, the big watch out is, of course, publishers, and the concerns around zero-click environments were felt very strongly in the research we did, and it's a very real concern. As I said, at the moment, we're not starting to see the impact of that in ad spend, but it may come in the next years or so.
What do you think it means if advertisers are making trading decisions based on modeling, AI modeling, or having creative open up to you if you're a smaller business on some of these other media channels? Do you expect a wider diversity of planning strategies that come from this, or actually a narrowing of what a model might tell you works best for your campaign?
I mean, I'm quietly optimistic that I think it's going to open up new areas of advertising to more brands than ever before. I think as long as we're doing it in the right way and we're keeping in mind some of those watch outs in terms of ensuring that we keep the human voice there, ensuring that there's consent and that it's all transparent, I think there is a lot of opportunities within AI. I don't think it is all a concern and an uncertain market. But I think we are all still working it out. I think the really short answer is we don't know too much yet, because we're still working out across all of our businesses of how to use AI and what the data is actually showing us about where those efficiencies are coming through and where the pluses are outweighing those minuses. So I think we still have to wait and see how it plays out a bit in the AI space.
I'm very impatient. I want to know all the answers right away. Well, you mentioned the impact on publishers more broadly, and we've done a lot of reporting on that here at the Media Leader. The implications from moving from sort of an SEO model where people do click on articles, but also brand websites a little bit more often, to a GEO or generative engine optimization model. Are those being felt yet, or do you expect 2026 to be the first year where we can really see, okay, brands have actually made a different strategy?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I think one that's a little bit difficult to unpick at the moment. I mean, if we talk just specifically about the publishing sector in digital advertising and what we saw last year, their growth was pretty flat. So they saw a 1% growth rate. At the moment, there are concerns around that zero-click environment, and that it might be reducing traffic, but we're not seeing the evidence of that in the ad spend figures that we're seeing. We are seeing other things happening that sort of help compend that sort of flat rate of growth for publishers. So whether it's the declining growth rates for digital display, for example, has been happening for quite a while, and we're starting to see the impact of that on publishing. But I think also the fact that publishers are now looking to other areas of business in order to diversify their offering, I think is a sign of that they are responding to some of those concerns around search and AI and what it means. So we've heard a lot in the industry over the last year, and certainly in the research we did, that publishers are starting to work more in audio and video, social. They're creating their own creator studios, for example. So they're starting to match the demand from advertisers by offering diverse channels within their portfolio.
Sort of moving where the money is.
Yeah.
It's interesting that traffic is down. I mean, and Reach just reported, the UK's largest publisher just reported their own financial results, and traffic was down substantially. But to your point, the ad revenue hasn't fallen that substantially relative to traffic necessarily. So it might just be a delayed reaction, Or, I mean, is there any actual hope that publishers don't necessarily need to fully pivot? Or is it really like publishers are generally have made the move, they understand the direction the future's going in, and they're sort of drawing up plans, or hopefully have already drawn up plans well in advance to sort of tap into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit more of the latter that we're hearing from the industry, that they are diversifying. They've made plans to account for some of that. I think we haven't seen, yeah, certainly in terms of the data the IAB sees, we haven't seen a lot of hard evidence yet, but we are, as you mentioned, publishers are feeling it already in terms of their traffic. I think publishers are echoing other parts of the industry, though, in terms of the fact that diversification, and I think also another trend that we heard a lot about was partnerships and collaboration are the way forward within digital advertising. We're probably going to see a lot more of that, and I would imagine the publishers are going to be operating in that space too, to try and account for some of these things that might be coming down the line.
Okay, so what is coming down the line? I always hate asking someone to give me a crystal ball answer, but if we were sitting down this same time next year after you do the 2026 digital ad spend report, what do you expect to have changed?
Yeah, so we do now actually, we now have forecasts in our ad spend report. We didn't used to, and we've started doing it this year, which is brilliant. I mean, we are expecting steady growth. So we're expecting another 10% growth next year and the year after that. And we think that's going to be pretty in line with the rest of Europe and the US as well. So UK has often been ahead of other markets. Aside from the US, we're actually sort of starting to see ourselves in line with the rest of Europe as well, although a much bigger market than other European markets. But we think the big drivers are likely to be the same: video, retail, social. Market conditions seem to be settling this year, and there are also some big events. So think about the World Cup happening. So we're hoping that's going to unlock consumer spend in digital as well. Media owners felt more confident. We asked them to compare how they felt about 2025, where they felt it was quite a cautious year and a difficult year. How do you feel about 2026? They're feeling more confident. They're feeling more hopeful. They think budgets are going to increase. And generally speaking, they think the diversification of the industry is a good opportunity. So we are quietly confident that 2026 is going to be a better year than 2025.
Barring any black swan event, hopefully none of those. I mean, it would be crazy to just start a new war in the Middle East or something like that. That would massively affect the global economy. I'm sure that won't happen.
Yeah, well, I can't comment, unfortunately, on geopolitics, but yes.
Well, I think it's a good place to leave it. We can talk again next year and see how correct the predictions are. But Elizabeth, it's been a total pleasure. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Media Leader podcast. Our executive producer is me, Jack Benjamin. Special thanks to our production partner, Trisonic. You can find all our episodes on the podcast platform of your choice or on our website at uk.themedialeader.com. But do please remember to subscribe to be notified of our next episode. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at The Media Leader to receive daily coverage of all the biggest news stories in media and advertising. From all of us at The Media Leader, I'm Jack Benjamin. See you next time.